The sound of gunfire echoed through the mall's food court. Marcus Reeves didn't think, he moved. One moment he was enjoying ice cream with his 8-year-old daughter Lily, the next he was diving across a stranger's table, shielding a little girl he'd never met as pain exploded through his shoulder. "You're safe, kid," he whispered as the world began to blur around him. "You're safe now." If this story already has you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories that remind us of the extraordinary courage found in ordinary people. Marcus Reeves never considered himself a hero. At 34, his life revolved around two things: his job as a high school history teacher and his daughter Lily. 3 years after losing his wife to cancer, he was still learning to navigate the world of single parenthood, the school lunches, the hair braiding, the constant worry that he wasn't enough for the bright-eyed little girl who depended on him for everything. That Saturday was supposed to be their daddy-daughter day. They had a whole itinerary planned: breakfast at their favorite diner, a matinee movie, and then a stop at the Westfield Mall for ice cream and window shopping. Lily had been looking forward to it all week, chattering excitedly about the new animated film and whether she would get chocolate or strawberry ice cream. These small moments of joy were what Marcus lived for now. The Westfield Mall was bustling with weekend shoppers. Hand in hand, Marcus and Lily made their way to the food court, where they claimed a small table near the center. 2 scoops of strawberry for Lily, she'd made up her mind after all, and coffee ice cream for Marcus. They were laughing about the movie they'd just seen when Marcus noticed the little girl at the next table. She was about Lily's age, with dark curls and a pink dress, sitting across from a woman in an expensive-looking suit who was engrossed in her phone. The little girl looked bored, pushing her ice cream around rather than eating it, occasionally glancing up at the woman, her mother, Marcus assumed, hoping for attention that didn't come. "Daddy, can I get another napkin?" Lily asked, ice cream dripping down her chin. "Sure, sweetheart." Marcus stood up, scanning for the napkin dispenser. That's when he saw him, a man in a dark hoodie entering the food court, moving with purpose, his hand reaching inside his jacket. Something about his movement set off alarm bells in Marcus's mind, a primal instinct honed by years of active shooter drills at his school. The first shot was aimed at the well-dressed woman at the next table. Later, Marcus would learn that Elise Chen was the CEO of a tech company embroiled in a bitter lawsuit with the shooter, a former employee who blamed her for destroying his life. But in that moment, all Marcus knew was that a child was in danger. He didn't remember moving. 1 second he was standing by his table, the next he was lunging across the space between them, pulling the little girl from her chair and covering her with his body as the second shot rang out. The bullet tore through his left shoulder, the pain immediate and blinding. Around them, chaos erupted, screams, running feet, more gunshots. Marcus stayed where he was, shielding the trembling child beneath him. "You're safe, kid," he whispered through gritted teeth. "You're safe now." Security tackled the shooter moments later. The last thing Marcus remembered before losing consciousness was Lily's terrified face appearing in his field of vision, tears streaming down her cheeks as she called for her daddy. Marcus woke up in the hospital 26 hours later. The bullet had shattered his shoulder blade and nicked an artery, requiring emergency surgery and multiple blood transfusions. The first face he saw was Lily's, curled up asleep in a chair beside his bed, her small hand clutching his. The second face belonged to Elise Chen. "Mr. Reeves," she said, her composed exterior cracking slightly as their eyes met. "I don't know how to begin to thank you. You saved my daughter's life." The little girl in the pink dress was Sophie Chen, 7 years old and the only child of one of the most powerful women in the tech industry. The shooter had been aiming for Sophie, not Elise, a twisted form of revenge that would have destroyed the CEO in ways no business setback ever could. "Anyone would have done the same," Marcus said weakly. Elise shook her head. "No. They wouldn't have." Her voice was steady but her eyes were red-rimmed from crying. "The doctors say you'll recover, but it's going to be a long road. I want you to know that every expense will be covered, the surgeries, the physical therapy, anything you need. Marcus tried to protest, but Elise was adamant. Please. It's the least I can do. What neither of them realized then was that this was just the beginning of a connection between their families that would change all of their lives forever. The media descended quickly. Local news at first, then national. Hero teacher takes bullet for stranger's child made headlines across the country. Marcus, still recovering in the hospital, was uncomfortable with the attention. He wasn't a hero, he insisted. He was just a dad who couldn't bear to see a child in danger. For Elise Chen, the incident forced a painful reckoning. As reporters dug into her background, they uncovered the story of a woman who had sacrificed everything for her career. 60-hour work weeks. Missed school plays. A marriage that had ended 2 years earlier, largely due to her absence. Sophie was being raised primarily by nannies while Elise built her empire. The contrast between Marcus, a teacher who made time for his daughter despite his modest means, and Elise, a CEO who could provide everything except her presence, was not lost on the public. Or on Elise herself. 3 weeks after the shooting, when Marcus was finally released from the hospital, he found Elise waiting in the lobby. "I'd like to talk to you," she said. Privately. They ended up at a quiet café near the hospital. Lily and Sophie were with Elise's assistant, getting ice cream, real ice cream this time, not the hospital cafeteria kind. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," Elise said, turning her coffee cup in her hands. "About what matters. About the kind of mother I want to be." She looked up at Marcus, her expression vulnerable in a way it hadn't been before. "I don't know how to do this. How to balance everything. But I look at you and Lily, and I see what I want for Sophie and me." Marcus was surprised by her candor. "I'm not exactly an expert," he admitted. "Most days I feel like I'm barely keeping it together." "But you are," Elise insisted. "You're there. You're present. That's more than I can say." That conversation marked the beginning of an unlikely friendship. Elise began to restructure her company, delegating more, setting boundaries. She started leaving the office by 5 most days. She and Sophie became regular visitors at Marcus and Lily's modest home, where the girls quickly became inseparable friends. For Marcus, the recovery was grueling. 3 more surgeries. Months of physical therapy. The school year started without him, and for the first time in his career, he had to take extended leave. The medical bills were covered as promised, but the loss of income and the challenges of single parenting while disabled took their toll. Elise noticed. Without making a big show of it, she found ways to help. Groceries would mysteriously appear on their doorstep. A college fund for Lily was established. When Marcus's ancient car finally died, a reliable used model appeared in his driveway with a simple note, "For the man who saved what matters most to me." 6 months after the shooting, Marcus returned to teaching, his left arm still in a brace but functional. His students welcomed him as a hero, though he still rejected the label. That evening, he came home to find Elise sitting on his porch steps. "I have a proposition," she said without preamble. "My company is starting an educational foundation. We need someone to run it, someone who understands what teachers and students really need. Someone with integrity and vision." She met his eyes. "I want it to be you." Marcus was stunned. "I'm a history teacher, Elise. I don't know the first thing about running a foundation." "You know what matters," she countered. "The rest you can learn." She handed him a folder. "The salary is considerably more than you make now. You'd have flexible hours, which means more time with Lily. And you'd be making a difference on a scale you never imagined." It was an opportunity Marcus had never dreamed of. A chance to advocate for teachers like himself, to create programs that could help thousands of students. After a week of consideration, he accepted. What neither of them anticipated was how working closely together would deepen their connection. Elise, who had built walls around herself after her divorce, found herself drawn to Marcus's warmth and authenticity. Marcus, who had been so focused on Lily that he'd barely thought about his own happiness, began to see Elise as more than just his boss or Sophie's mother. Their first kiss happened late one night at the foundation office, after hours of working on a grant proposal. It took them both by surprise, and terrified them for different reasons. Elise feared opening herself up to potential hurt again. Marcus worried about the implications for their daughters, who had become as close as sisters. "We need to be careful," Marcus said afterward. "There's more at stake here than just us." Elise agreed. They decided to take things slowly, to be thoughtful about how and when to involve the girls. But life rarely follows careful plans. 1 year to the day after the shooting, the four of them returned to the mall, a deliberate choice to reclaim a place of trauma. They had ice cream in the food court, sitting at the same tables where their lives had intersected so dramatically. Sophie, now 8, climbed into Marcus's lap and wrapped her arms around his neck. "Thank you for saving me," she said solemnly. "You're welcome, sweetheart," Marcus replied, his voice thick with emotion. Lily watched this exchange, then turned to Elise. "Are you and my dad going to get married?" The adults exchanged startled glances. "What makes you ask that?" Marcus managed. Lily rolled her eyes with the exasperation only an almost 10-year-old could muster. "Because you look at each other the way people do in movies. And because Sophie and I decided we want to be real sisters." Sophie nodded enthusiastically. "We already picked out our bridesmaid dresses." Elise laughed, the sound bright and genuine in a way it rarely had been before Marcus entered her life. "Well, he hasn't asked me yet." "Actually," Marcus said quietly, reaching into his pocket. "I was planning to do that tonight." The ring wasn't extravagant. A teacher's salary, even with a promotion to foundation director, couldn't compete with a CEO's resources. But Elise's tears as he slipped it onto her finger told him it was perfect. They were married 6 months later in a small ceremony with the girls as their only attendants. The media caught wind of it, of course. Hero teacher marries CEO whose daughter he saved made for irresistible headlines. But the reality of their relationship was far more complex and beautiful than any headline could capture. It wasn't always easy. Blending families never is. There were adjustments and compromises. Marcus had to learn to navigate Elise's world of wealth and privilege without losing himself. Elise had to learn that control and perfection weren't always possible or desirable. The girls had their moments of jealousy and insecurity. But through it all, there was love, the kind that grows from gratitude and admiration, from seeing someone at their most vulnerable and most courageous. 5 years after the shooting, the foundation Marcus directed had become one of the most respected educational nonprofits in the country. Elise had restructured her company to allow for true work-life balance, not just for herself but for all her employees. Lily and Sophie, now teenagers, were as close as any biological sisters could be. And Marcus's shoulder, though it would never be the same, had healed enough to allow him to coach Lily's basketball team and teach Sophie to swim, ordinary acts of fatherhood that felt like miracles given how close he'd come to losing everything. On quiet evenings, when the girls were doing homework and the house was peaceful, Marcus and Elise would sometimes talk about that day at the mall, how a single moment of violence and courage had set them on a path neither could have imagined. "Do you ever regret it?" Elise asked once. "Taking that bullet?" Marcus looked at her in surprise. "Never. Not for a second. Even with all the pain, the surgeries." He took her hand, his thumb tracing the wedding band he'd placed there. "That bullet brought you and Sophie into our lives. It gave Lily a sister and a mother figure she desperately needed. It gave me a purpose beyond my classroom and a love I never thought I'd find again." He smiled. Some prices are worth paying. In the end, that was the lesson they carried forward, that sometimes the most painful moments can lead to the greatest blessings, that courage isn't about being fearless but about acting despite your fear, and that family isn't always defined by blood but by the people who show up for each other when it matters most. As for Marcus Reeves, the reluctant hero, he still insisted he was just a dad who did what any parent would do. But to Sophie, to Elise, to the thousands of students benefiting from his foundation's work, he was proof that ordinary people are capable of extraordinary courage, and that a single act of selflessness can create ripples of change that transform lives forever. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing these powerful stories of everyday heroes who remind us of the best in humanity. Leave a comment below about a time when someone's kindness changed your life, because sometimes the most important stories are the ones we share with each other.